What's the truth about Puerto Rico's tax program? Is it somewhere you should consider moving? Because I mean, look at this. It's certainly beautiful. Now, I've actually lived in Puerto Rico on 2 separate occasions, and I've spent a total of 4 years living here in the island in 4 different areas. So I think I can provide a lot of perspective. I've spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars consulting with top tax experts, both CPAs and tax attorneys, based here in Puerto Rico. So I'm going to share with you the truths, the misconceptions, the cost of living here, areas to consider, what the different tax programs are, how they can be used, a lot of the false stuff that people say about them, because I've gone through it. And at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you who I think should move here based on your financial income bracket. So I'm going to break it down and give you my recommendation. Now, it's the middle of summer, so it's a little warm out. Let's head back to the house and do a breakdown. Big misconceptions. Every business qualifies for the tax program. That is false. Another one, local Puerto Ricans can't take advantage of the same tax program. That is completely false. I will simply redirect you to the IRS tax code, which you can go read. Seems like many people haven't. That's false. Many of my neighbors, many of my friends who are local Puerto Ricans who grew up here take advantage of the same program that I do. I get no special treatment. Another one, you've built your company for 6 years in the States and you move down to Puerto Rico and a year or two later you sell it tax-free. False. It's not where the company was built. There's an equation there on how that works. You can't simply move here and then immediately sell something. The gains weren't sourced here. Now, some truths. You can pay 0% in capital gains. Your company can pay 4% in corporate tax, which is awesome. Another truth, you must actually live here. That is true. And there's a lot of nuanced things. So forgive me while I go through my notes. I want to make sure I get through everything. We're going to talk about a lot of different stuff today. And let's start with what some of the tax programs are. There's obviously the big boys that get thrown around, and we're going to talk about those today because that's what I have direct experience with. But there's a lot of different tax programs. People don't really realize this. Agriculture, pharmaceutical and medical stuff, manufacturing. There are totally different, very specialized tax grants for different industries that people don't typically talk about. You've got Act 183. A lot of people throw around the word Act 60 these days, which is really a combination of 2 separate acts. And this is what people don't understand. Act 20, this is the export of services. Okay, this is a big one. This is what I take advantage of. This is when you hear the 4% corporate tax. My company went through an application process. 9 or 10 months later, we got approved. This is where I can operate my company from Puerto Rico. And so long as we meet a decent list of restrictions, which includes some things like no U.S. office space, no U.S. employees, a couple other things, then we can operate here. I must actually run the business and export the services from Puerto Rico. Software companies, consulting companies, maybe YouTubers who make videos here. I have a friend who designs video games, stuff like that. You can do the work here. Awesome. And then Act 22 is where you hear people talk about the big 0%. That gets thrown around. That's actually a much smaller amount of people who are in that program, but this is where you pay no capital gains. And I think they were in the middle of revising that and they want to make it go from 0 to 4% capital gains. I don't know if that's approved or in progress. Anyways, this comes with a separate list of restrictions. You must purchase a home within 2 years. You must donate $10,000 a year to a nonprofit Puerto Rican charity. You must do a couple of these other, again, restrictions for each one that you have to read the tax code and look at or consult with experts. Pretty simple stuff, but this is where your gains sourced here in Puerto Rico, crypto, stocks, whatever, even private equity investments into a company, whatever, that's a capital gain and it can be taxed at 0. Now again, misconception, you can't run up a bag in crypto while you're living in Miami, move here and immediately sell. Again, the gains weren't sourced here. So a lot of people typically do is to make it very clean when, and this is not advice, consult with an expert, but when they make the move, they will have sold everything to kind of lock in that basis and either take the loss or take the gain and pay based on that and rebuy immediately when they move here, the day or two later, and just kind of re-enter. So a lot of people do that as a fresh position if it's stocks or crypto. But again, you can't just take the credit for gains that were sourced elsewhere. You could also just look at where it was on the day you moved. That's another thing people do. So pretty simple stuff. And I want to say that you can separate these out. A lot of people talk about Act 60 and say, oh, like you have to be in Act 60 and that requires you to do X, Y, Z. That's just false language. You shouldn't speak like that because these are 2 separate decrees that are filed separately. You do not have to be in the capital gains program to move down here and vice versa. A lot of people don't realize that. I did not need to join that program, which has more restrictions, requires me to donate money, purchase a property, and do a couple of other things. I don't really source capital gains. I don't buy crypto. I'm not big in stocks. It's just not my thing. So again, just want to make it clear you can still separate those, okay? Now, one of the things that I wanted to chat about here is my company setup. I feel like it might offer some insight. When I first moved down here, it was very simple. I was only running random drop shipping stores where we were just running up a bag with different e-commerce products, and it was like this. It was just up and down, up and down. Stuff would happen, you get shut down on Facebook, and we're good at e-commerce. So we would do that, we'd make a lot of money, and then we also have a consulting company where I work with people and help them do e-commerce. Very specific niche setup that we work with, and nowadays we only work with supplement brands and people doing long-term stuff. But basically, that allowed me to source all of that through Puerto Rico because we had no US office space, no US warehouses, no inventory in the US. So I moved down here, I exported all of my services from here for the consulting that we did, talking with people, making YouTube videos, whatever, $2,000 a month comes from this. Like that little stuff can all go directly through here. So that made the process very easy. Nowadays, that's not the case. I have a much larger e-commerce brand. We do have facilities in the US. We do have that we partner with. We do have a lot of inventory that sits in the US. That's where we store it. And so now this becomes a much more, I don't want to say complex, but there's a lot more steps to it. So now I have the company here that exports services. I do a lot of work. I consult and do services for my e-commerce company that is in the States. Okay, and you have to do what's called a transfer pricing study. This basically is a third-party firm that is kind of used as a defense in case you ever did get audited to prove what percentage of your profits you can pull to Puerto Rico. So basically, I have an e-commerce company in the US that files a US return. It makes profit. It's going to pay a lot of money in taxes, but I can take some of my profits and bring them here for the services that I am, through my company here, providing to my company back in the States, if that makes sense. It has to have a profit. And so it's going to be a lot of money that we pay in tax, but I can take some benefit here. And that totally depends on what services you're performing for your company, what industry it's in. They basically pull a report of all the industry standard and a lot of stuff. And again, that gives you both the number that you can then take, beyond a certain amount of profit you can bring to Puerto Rico. And it also, again, helps if you were ever to get audited, it proves that you have numbers to back up why you're doing it that way. So again, I will defer that to proper tax attorneys and whoever if you are going down that route. But that's just one thing that I wanted to mention. We will pay a lot of money in taxes still to the US, and then obviously bring a fair bit here to Puerto Rico as well. Finding good CPAs in Puerto Rico, very difficult. I suggest hiring somebody who's an attorney, okay, a tax attorney, someone who's a little notch above. It's just difficult to find quality people here who are professional and responsive. So moving on, that's just a little bit about my company structure. You must actually live here. This is a whole nother topic people don't consider. And living here, a lot of people think, days test, 183, that's 6 months plus a day. Great, guess what, buddy? If you do that, and you keep your wife and kids back home, you don't actually live here. If you do that and you're a single dude or have a girlfriend or whatever, and you have a dog that you had for a long time before, and that dog stays in New York and you come down here, not looking good. People have literally lost audits in New York based on where your pet is. There's a lot of factors to consider. So let me just break this down plain and simple. You have a big house back home, 2 kids and a wife. Kids are in school there, they stay there, and you come down here, and yeah, you might spend half the year here and then go back. You have much more ties back to where you came from. And a lot of people don't realize that. I've gotten somewhat close with this billionaire neighbor of mine. He does 6 months straight here, doesn't really travel throughout unless he needs to for work, and then immediately goes back home for 6 months. That would be questionable. Yes, he brings his family, all his kids, he's got many kids, brings them all down. And yeah, his house here he paid $40 million for, and his one back home, I don't know, not that much, it's still a nice spot, but like, it's not a good look. You might have gym memberships and cars back there, more vehicles than you have here. You might have closer ties. And so you just have to be able to reasonably defend in the event of an audit. Again, this is not advice, but you got to be able to prove that it is your primary residence. That can mean a lot of things, like getting a driver's license here, voting here, taking advantage of, like, being involved in certain clubs, participating in sports, doing like, you got to make it your home, So it's just something to consider. And another thing is when you do enter the program, like for what I'm doing with the corporate tax, it's a 3-year minimum you're committing to. So I know people who've stayed here for a year and they leave, you owe back taxes for that year. Like, you did not meet the minimum requirement. So there's different things like that. Now we get into actually living here, and then I'm going to talk about income brackets and who I think should move here. So stick with me because this will really help you if you want to come down and visit. I think these are some places you should check out. There's a couple different locations that I think you should consider living depending on your lifestyle and what you're trying to do. You have San Juan, the main city, the main airport, easy to get in and out of. There's a lot of little pockets and towns around that you can choose to live in. This is where I first moved because it seemed like the easiest thing. It was also, relatively cheap in comparison to other alternatives. I did move down here like right during the pandemic, so prices were just sky high. First apartment that I had in the city was $12,000. Now I was splitting that with somebody, but still, like it was a lot. So you have San Juan. Again, a lot of pockets in there. I lived in Condado, which is like right in the main tourist hub, very busy, very loud, but a cool way to see everything for the first year. I then lived in Isla Verde, then I lived in Santurce, and then I left the island, and now I live in Dorado, okay? There's a couple different areas to consider. If you want to live in San Juan, prices range drastically. You can get a pretty nice place for $3,500 a month, $4,000 a month. It's gonna be a nice, really nice one bedroom or a pretty nice two bedroom in a good area, close to the beach, whatever. That's your price point. Safety, you know, I had a buddy get a machine gun pressed against his neck while his buddy had a shotgun in his chest, and they tried to rob him. Safety, you know, can kind of be a concern. I've definitely woken up to the sound of gunfire before in the city, and I'm not saying necessarily that I felt unsafe in any situation. But, you know, it happens. That's just the truth of the matter. So San Juan is an option. Palmas del Mar, kind of the other side of the island, about an hour drive away. Very large, kind of older feel, slow pace, retirement type community, couple golf courses. Some people like it. I think it's a little too quiet for me. I've gone over there to golf. I really like their flamboyant golf course. So go around the island, check it all out. But that's a spot, very large neighborhood, a lot of families over there, but it seems a little bit of an older demographic for me. You have Bahia Beach, which is the St. Regis Resorts. St. Regis Resort is about to become the Four Seasons, actually. They just did a partnership deal. That is a very quiet, kind of dead feeling community. It is just eerie quiet over there. Another very nice place. But again, just there's not a lot of activity. You don't really have families over there because you don't have a school over there. Somebody would have to shuttle the kids all the way into the city. Bahia Beach is 45 minutes east, if you're looking north, it's 45 minutes east of San Juan. Dorado Beach is 45 minutes west. So it's just the opposite split. And those are really the two neighborhoods that people typically go to who are very high income earners and, you know, either want privacy, safety, quietness, maybe they have a family. And then a lot of people go over to Dorado. Now, Dorado and Dorado Beach, two different things. Dorado Beach is maybe a third of Dorado, but Dorado Beach behind the gates, it's the Ritz-Carlton community. You've got a lot of stuff inside of there. You've got thousands of homes, a couple condo buildings, and it's a very expensive, very nice place. You have Tassis in Dorado, which is a super nice private school. A lot of people bring their kids there, very high quality. And there's other areas. You could go all the way to the other side of the island over to Rincon and down to Ponce. I have friends in Rincon. It's kind of the surf town. Like if you want to be more plugged in and be there in the culture, you can totally do that. I have friends that love it. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for. And so I'd really recommend spending some time here before you came here. And price points, just to break it down. Bahia Beach, if you're purchasing 1.8 million up to 9 million, depending on kind of what you're buying. Obviously, one bedroom condos up to really nice homes. Rental prices, you're going to start at like $13,000 to $15,000 a month for a condo. Entry level, plus there's memberships in there. San Juan, you could get something for $1,200 a month, but really good something's going to start at $3,500 to $4,000 a month. Pretty similar and comparable pricing to like a big city. Palmas del Mar, similar thing. You get a nice rental for $3,500, $4,500. Very quiet. You'll probably be a little bit bored over there, especially if you're younger. I don't go out. I don't party. That's not my thing. So I actually moved away from the city. In Dorado Beach, if you want to purchase something, you could tickle the top twos, 2.8, 2.7. Plantation apartments are starting to trade there finally. But really, you're at like 4.5 plus for a house, all the way up to 50 million. Like it's a very wide range. A lot of good quality properties transact in that $6 to $12 million price range. It's expensive. And if you want to rent something, typical entry points is $12,000 to $15,000 a month. It's rare to find something lower than that. If you want a house, something decent starts at about $20,000 a month, and there's membership on top of that. It's a very expensive thing. Currently, I pay $13,500 a month, and that's kind of on the low end. Like, I jumped on that quickly. I paid a year up front to reduce the cost even more. You know, there's a lot of different things like that where it's just expensive and you got to factor that in, okay? But those are some of the areas that I think you should check out. It's worth it. There's other things to consider with living here. Shipping times are slower. Finding fresh produce is more difficult, you know, depending on your diet and what you're eating. Just different things. Now, I moved back down to Puerto Rico. I wanted to address this. A lot of people were surprised. I never thought I would. But I came back down here because I went and searched far and wide. I went to Dubai. I went to Kuala Lumpur. I went to Switzerland, places a lot of people probably haven't really considered when they do the research, but really talking with the experts that help people relocate around the world, buy different passports and move their money internationally. And none of them compared to this specific pocket. Not just Puerto Rico, but this neighborhood that I live in is ultimately the reason that I chose to move back down. Now, I also kind of do my best work when I'm tucked away alone in a corner, but where I can still socialize. I'm around people that are similar and the health is a priority. And honestly, that was not San Juan for me. It just wasn't. And so when I came down to visit Dorado Beach and spent the money to stay here, like Airbnb starts at like $1,000 a night. So came down here for a week, and I was like, within 3 days, I was like, yeah, I need to do this. And so to do that, you have to be making enough money. Like, it's just expensive at the end of the day. So I do think it's a mistake to come down here to Puerto Rico and downgrade your lifestyle. I've never once seen that work out well for anybody. So you have to either maintain or upgrade. If you only drive G-Wagons and Range Rovers back in the States, you got to get something comparable here if you want a vehicle. Otherwise, it's just going to be less enjoyable. It will eat at you. And at the end of the day, the money you tried to save by not doing that is probably going to cause you to leave earlier. So the delta difference of what you would have saved in taxes, you just lost more money because of that. That's typically the equation that I see play out, okay? And I could 100% see myself starting a family here, for sure. I see a lot of people, young families here. It's a really good spot. Then maybe you move away later. I don't know. It could totally be a long-term spot. It's really incredible, okay? Now, financially speaking, who should move here? And these are just some off-the-top thoughts in general. Like all of this stuff, we could sit here for hours and go way deeper. But who should move here? First of all, don't move here just for taxes. Make sure you've spent a little bit of time here. Make sure you know a couple people here first. Try to integrate yourself. But you better be consistent with your income and 100% certain that it's going to continue, okay? Now, who should move here? I think that if you make under $500,000 a year net, like, and ideally have been doing that for a bit, if you make under that, not advisable, okay? You could do it. I just wouldn't recommend it, okay? Now, if you're starting to hit that 500 to $1 million a year, I think there's a lot of opportunity. You're starting to talk about, hey, a few $100,000 a year in tax savings. You probably get a decent little spot. You definitely don't make enough money to live in Dorado Beach. Maybe if you're the cheapest spot, you're making on the upper end of that spectrum of income and you were splitting it with somebody and you found a creative way, or maybe you didn't have a membership, so you lived in Dorado, like in Sabanera, but not actually in, maybe. But you know, just got to factor that in, okay? Now, if you make, in my opinion, 100 to 200K a month is really where this like unlocks, and just like big thumbs up. You could probably afford to live in Dorado, which again, I would just recommend. It's an amazing spot. If that's your style, check it out first. And then anything beyond that, obviously, is cake. But I think that's kind of the entry point, in my opinion. 500, you could start to argue. $1 million plus really starts to make sense. Because if you're making 100 to 200, you're talking about 1.2 to 2.4 net a year. That's 500,000 to 1.4 million a year in tax savings, depending on where you were living before. Like now you're talking about, let's just take a whole number. You're spending 750 grand you would have been spending on taxes. That's a huge amount of money. That's a lot. And you have to look at the opportunity cost of what you're spending in taxes. Because let's just say you were going to pay 750 grand in tax in the US. Well, let's say if you're going to do that 5 years in a row. Do the math on that, whatever that is, like $3 million. Well, what's the growth of that? Your money invested on average is going to double every 7 years. So play that out. You are talking about just a couple years of tax savings, tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars down the road. So that's part of what I look at as well. And the way that I see it here, this is just my mental framework. If you want to copy it, go ahead. Here's your income. Previously, you had taxes, living expenses, and extra cash, right? Taxes being the big chunk, what you spend on living, and savings, which hopefully that's a large number. Here, it's a little reversed. For the sake of argument, you're going to pay taxes, but let's just say it's zero. Let's say taxes is now removed. Now all you have is living expense and savings. So what I like to do is take 30% or so of what I would have spent on taxes, and if you can live on that, you've now actually eliminated, okay, your living expenses, and now you're just spending a piece of what you would have spent on taxes, right? That's just the tax of living here, if you want to kind of think about it that way. And so if I can live on a small percentage, ideally, of my tax savings and live a really good life on doing so, that to me just makes a lot of sense. Now, everybody's different. Do what you want. But I think that's kind of the framework you need to consider. And obviously, I mean, there's people here who make millions of millions. I have friends who do 5 million, 10 million. I don't know who the highest, I mean, there's obviously a billionaire guy. I don't know him crazy well. But in terms of like people that I'm like pretty close with, you know, I don't know if anybody's doing more than like 10 net, but like you're talking about a lot of money. You know, there's a lot of people, and just the people you're bumping into here constantly are insane. Like, yo, this guy ran up 700 million with this. He's got an accounting firm that does $1 billion. Okay, now we're playing pickleball. Yeah, I'm golfing with this guy who built this automotive company. Like you bump into them. Yeah, maybe they're not like crazy close friends, but you're saying hello, you get the phone number, you're chatting, you're sharing dinners here and there, you're bumping into a lot of people at church. Like there's a lot of things moving here. It's just a really nice, enjoyable place to be. Now, all the more bonus if you actually enjoy living here in Puerto Rico. Like that, I think, is the winning formula. You want to enjoy where you live, because the initial mistake that I realized when I came down here is I valued the freedom more than anything, and then I felt like it was a trade-off when I came here. That's because I didn't set things up correctly. And ultimately, I had to go spend 4 to 5x more on my cost of living overall to live in a place that I really liked here. And at the end of the day, to do that, you have to be able to make the money to support that, okay? And like consistently, and I didn't feel comfortable with that prior. And so, you know, pros and cons. At the time, I was also spending all of my money just buying real estate aggressively back in the States. And so again, there's pros and cons for each person to consider. But those are just some of my thoughts on Puerto Rico. In general, it's a great place. Like, you have options. Now, I'm not against paying taxes. Again, I will pay a lot in taxes. My company in the States pays more in tax every year than the average American pays in their lifetime. And that's not a cop-out or whatever. Like, I don't think that you should actively try to piss away money in taxes. I don't, because it clearly does not get used super well. So I do what's best for me and what's best for my future family, and that's it. And then everything I do quietly behind the doors with church and philanthropic stuff, like that's between me and them. And it's fun to be able to then do more of that because you have more free capital. And so I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm very much so in like a head down season of growth and building. I think that's when it's the right stage to be here. If you've been blessed enough to be in a position where you might qualify to be in the tax program here, you're younger, maybe you're 35 or under, maybe you're single or don't have kids yet, and you can move down here and do it for a stretch and see if you like it. I really don't think there's a lot of harm in doing that. Like, you could really help set yourself up aggressively so. So just food for thought, but I hope you enjoyed this video. Drop me a follow here or subscribe on YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram. I post way more over there. Been a little busy to make YouTube videos, but if you have any questions, leave it in the comments down below. I'm an open book. Just wanted to put this out because, especially when I was considering moving back down here, there is no content at all on Dorado Beach, like at all. And I want to always respect people's privacy and information about exact pricing and membership stuff. But in general, like, there's just not information out there on it. And that made it a big question mark for me. So I had to come down here and spend the money to check it out to really see if it was for me. So hopefully I can save somebody some time at least. Then this video was a win. So see you in the next one.